Hi, I want to thank you for joining me today for my final project. I chose to look into vegetarianism and world hunger. This topic hits very close to home, and I was very interested to learn more. So, to begin, around 1 year ago, I gave up meat due to some health issues. My overall diet greatly improved from the junk food I was eating to a very clean vegetarian diet. But when I first started, I had absolutely no idea where to start. I didn't understand where I'd get my protein from. I didn't understand what types of foods to cook. So I tried to do a lot of online research and really just dive into what a vegetarian lifestyle looks like. And the overarching theme that I saw was there was vegetarians who were doing it for health and those who were doing it for ethical purposes. And I almost fell down the rabbit hole in a sense, and I ended up reading a lot of articles about the environmental impact of meat and animal production on our earth, and also the issue of world hunger and how vegetarianism plays a role in that. So before I dive into the nitty gritty of what I researched, I just want to really quickly go through the types of vegetarians and vegans. This was something that I had no idea about when I first became a vegetarian. I thought it was just vegetarian and that was it. But vegetarians avoid eating any meat, and vegans avoid eating or using any animal products. So no honey, no eggs, no dairy. They also usually don't wear leather or anything that would have been derived from an animal. So even within this, there are health vegetarians, which is what I originally started as, and that is people who are doing it for the benefit of their health. There are also ethical vegetarians, the main one of this being the animal rights vegetarians. They think that it's wrong to kill animals for consumption, and vegans believe it's wrong to use animals for any source of food, so even milking a cow or getting eggs from a chicken. Along with that, there's also the environmental vegetarians. This is what I'm going to focus on the most. These are the vegetarians who abstain from eating meat for environmental effects and world hunger effects. And lastly, there are people who are vegetarian for religious beliefs. This is very common in the Hindu religion, where many of them are vegetarians. So, what exactly is the impact of meat on our earth? To begin, of our usable land, so land that's not covered in water or ice, we use 30% of that for animals to graze on, which is crazy. That's almost a third of our earth just to raise animals. Um, 18% of the greenhouse gas emissions actually come from raising cattle, mainly livestock and beef, and that is actually more than transportation. So during all of these conferences and these governments trying to say we're going to do better about environmental, they often focus on transportation. They focus on cars and semis and airplanes and the effect that those has, but they rarely ever talk about the fact that meat is actually producing more than that. It's also the largest driver of deforestation in the Amazon rainforest, as the production and the desire for meat continues to grow around the globe. They are having to tear down more and more trees and more land to actually make more land for the cattle to graze on. So I could really go on for a long time about the argument here of why vegetarianism can help solve world hunger, but I kind of have three statistics that I think sum most of it up. So to begin, 20 million people die every year from hunger. This was an overarching theme of the class, but hunger is a real issue in our world, and I personally do not believe that we're doing enough to address it, and we're not doing enough to try and fight it. These next two statistics just really kind of blew my mind when I read them, but if every person in the world consumed their meat consumption by 10%, that land could grow 12 million tons of grain. 10% in a week of 14 meals, that's halving one meat portion and swapping for a vegetarian option in another meal. So that's really not a huge impact on people's day-to-day diets, and that has such a huge impact around the globe. And then the last one that really just boggles my mind is on 1 acre of land, you can produce 250 pounds of beef or 40,000 pounds of potatoes. And if you don't know, potatoes are actually an extremely useful crop because not only they're a starchy vegetable, so they fill you up really well, but they actually do have protein and a lot of micronutrients, and they're considered to be a pretty healthy crop. So the fact that we could grow so much of a crop that could sustain so many people, but instead we choose to grow beef on it is kind of crazy to me. So it's almost impossible to talk about vegetarianism or veganism and not get into an ethical debate. It's what happens every time I get dinner with my grandparents or I hang out with a group of friends. They all just tell me, like, we have the power and we have the money, so thus it's okay for us to eat meat. And I think this really fits into natural law. It's the idea that because we're in this position of power and this position of wealth, that we have the right and we have the access to consume meat, that it's okay. I also, a lot of times, people tell me that our ancestors did it and their ancestors did it, and it's just how it's always been done. The other view is really the view that I have, and that is utilitarianism. And just with even just the few facts that I showed you, and there are so many more out there, if everyone went vegetarian or vegan, we could make so much more food to support the population. And I think it's crazy that people try to deny this. I have a roommate who's from a farming family, and she even will tell me that she doesn't think that that's real, and she thinks that meat is the healthy way to go. But I do believe that everyone going vegetarian or vegan would greatly impact this world hunger issue that we have. So, in summary of a topic that I could probably go on for hours about, I believe that being a vegetarian is doing the greatest good for the greater good. By making mindful decisions on my end, I can impact people around the world with their access to food. I didn't even get into the ideas of the health benefits that comes from having a vegetarian diet, but there are so many studies out there that show that if you're a vegetarian, you're on average will have a lower BMI and less risk for cardiovascular disease. It's crazy how much your diet can improve. And the last point I just want to touch on, because I know so many people when this topic comes up just goes, I could never give up bacon, or I like steak, and that's okay. I also miss meat sometimes. And I think just mindful consumption and reasonable portions and a reasonable number of times per week could make such a big impact on our overall world. And I think that that is something that people just don't take into consideration as much. They think it's an all or nothing thing when it comes to meat, but really we should be looking at somewhere in between where they can be enjoyed in moderation. And finally, here are just the three sources that I used throughout this presentation. Thank you so much for watching, and I've had a great semester.